Good afternoon, my dear brothers and sisters. As we are gathered together in this celebration of the Holy Mass on the 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time, the overriding theme of our readings is the theme on rejection. The people of Israel rejected God's message. But we know that these people were the chosen people of God. God has a preferential love for them. For back to their history, they were the ones who were oppressed, and God took side with them. God led them to that land of promise, to that land flowing with milk and honey, a land of abundance. And in due time, yes, they prosper. However, my dear brothers and sisters, as they prosper, they began to forget God. God made a covenant with them. I am your God, and you are my people. That was how special, or that is how special they are to God. But as what I have said, as they experienced that relative prosperity in that land God promised to them, they forgot the covenant God made with them. The first indication was, part of that covenant was that they are to come together as one people, and they do not have to choose any king, because only Yahweh, their God, is their king. But again, as time went by, they have forgotten that, and they insisted that they should have a king. But they were also reminded by the prophets that in case you will choose a human king, you will only experience what you previously experienced. You will be oppressed and exploited. But they did not listen to the words of the prophets. And so, they finally had a king. The first one was Saul, followed by King David, Solomon, and the rest on the line. Many of the kings did not live to their vocation as shepherds of God's people. And so we come, and we have heard in our first reading from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, the people of Israel became stubborn. They became obstinate of heart. But God did not surrender, because our God is a faithful God. And here He sent Ezekiel to remind these people who become rebellious of heart. Whether they will listen to you or not, they should know that there is a prophet in the midst of them. The theme of rejection. In the second reading from the book, or from the letter of Paul to the Corinthians, the same theme was being presented. The authority of Paul was questioned because he is not part of the 12. He was even once a great persecutor of Christians. And with that, the Apostle Paul, no matter how devoted he was in proclaiming the good news, he met a lot of resistance, a lot of oppositions. The same theme that is being presented in our gospel from the Gospel of St. Mark. The Lord Jesus, after proclaiming the good news of God's kingdom in many places, he went to his hometown in Nazareth. When it was Sabbath, he went to the synagogue and teach. And many who heard him were astonished. But that astonishment was accompanied with unbelief. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us?" The Lord Jesus was too familiar to them. And so, they cannot believe. My dear brothers and sisters, in our life of faith, what are the areas that in one way or another we have rejected God's message? Is it true that the message of God has been so familiar to us? Is it true that our Christian faith, which by the grace of God on this very year we celebrate its 5th centenary, has become very familiar to us? And if our Christian faith and all our celebrations has become so familiar to us, does it call for a lack of faith? Does it call for a lack of enthusiasm? Does it call for a lack of interest? My dear brothers and sisters, familiarity should not breed contempt. While it is true there is a familiar saying which goes, familiarity breeds contempt. But in the light of our Christian faith, familiarity should not breed contempt. On the contrary, familiarity of our Christian faith should deepen all the more our commitment to the teachings of the Lord, to the proclamation of the good news of God's kingdom, so that the theme on this 5th centenary of our faith, gifted to give, will really be a reality in each one of us. What are the instances, perhaps, when the message of our Christian faith of which becoming familiar to us and of which we have the tendency to reject. I think it is very clear for all of us that Christian life is geared towards service. Following the Lord, who comes not to be served, but to serve. And so, in all honesty, we only have to examine ourselves. Is service something like our second nature? Is service something like a habit? Or have we formed a habit of service? Because that is what it entails to be a disciple of the Lord, to be a Christian. In our life as a community, as a society, in terms of law and order, in terms of governance, has the message of our faith been permeated? If not, then like the people of Nazareth and the people of Israel during the time of the prophet Ezekiel, we too have rejected God's message in many subtle ways. As a country, we are proud. Like East Timor, majority of us are Christians. Majority of us are Catholics. And this calls all the more for all of us to be committed in our Christian faith. And one of the things to measure whether we are really committed in our Christian faith is the one which I've mentioned earlier, our sense of service. In our family, in our community, in our workplace, is that sense of service the one occupying our heart. For Carolinians, we have the essentia, virtus, and devotio. And personally, I would like to see the devotio part, because that confirms our essentia and virtus. And devotio is that sense of service, that sense of commitment to the people around us. And for me, that is what makes us authentic disciples of the Lord. So these readings for today calls us to a life of renewal, to follow the Lord in all honesty, to follow the Lord and to commit ourselves totally to the message of the Lord, and to configure our life to the life of the Lord. A life of service, a life of faithfulness, a life of commitment to the will of the Father. And with that, we can claim ourselves as disciples of the Lord. And that theme on this 5th centenary of our Christian faith, gifted to give, will become more and more meaningful to each one of us. Gifted to give. We share the richness of our Christian faith with one another and with every person we encounter along the way. Let us now profess